Montana Territory, August 1884. The sun was high and cruel the day Helena Sutton stood alone in her wedding dress, sweat slipping down her spine, lace sticking to her arms, and her heart tearing in two where the church doors had never opened. The pews behind her were half filled. Her cousins whispered, the preacher kept checking his pocket watch, and the man she was supposed to marry, Franklin Miles, banker's son, all polished boots and promises, was nowhere in sight. He rode out this morning, someone muttered behind her, loud enough for her to hear. Headed west. Alone. Helena didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just turned, walked down the church steps, and kept walking until her boots found the dry dust of the main road. Her veil snagged on a fence post. She didn't stop to pull it free. It was in that moment when Helena's world had cracked wide open, and she was too proud to fall apart in front of anyone that a tall man stepped down from a bay-roan horse at the edge of town. His shirt was dusted in trail dirt, hat pulled low, and eyes steady as iron. "Helena!" His voice was low but sure. She blinked up, not believing at first. Boone Barrett, the cowboy who used to help her father break colts before the fever took him. The boy who used to slip her wildflowers and carve her wooden horses when she was 12 and he was 15. The one who left for Kansas cattle drives 4 years ago and never wrote. Now he stood there like he had never been gone, like he had been waiting just beyond the edge of her grief, just outside the wreckage of this ruined day. He looked at her, really looked, then stepped closer and slipped his hand around hers. His palm was rough and warm. "You were never his," he said. "You were already mine." The world tilted. She looked down at their joined hands, at the dirt smudged into his knuckles and the sunburn at the edge of his wrist. "You left," she whispered. "I know." His jaw worked. "But I came back. I heard about the wedding, rode 3 days straight to get here." Helena pulled her hand free. "A little late, Boone," he nodded like he deserved that. "Maybe, but I am not leaving again." She turned from him before her face betrayed her. She still wore the white dress, but it felt like a costume now, like a lie she had told herself. She needed to get out of it. She needed to breathe. "I cannot do this here," she said. "Then let me take you somewhere quiet," Boone said. "Just to talk." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Fine, but not in this." She gestured to the dress. Boone waited while she changed behind the mercantile. She came back out in a faded blue skirt and cream blouse, her dark hair braided down her back. The wedding shoes were gone, replaced by scuffed riding boots. There was dirt on the hem of her skirt and a storm behind her eyes. They rode out past the edge of town to the old Sutton homestead. The fields were overgrown now, the barn leaning, the porch half collapsed. No one had lived there since her mother died 2 years ago. Helena had moved into a room above the schoolhouse where she taught reading to farm kids and kept her grief to herself. Boone helped her down from her horse without a word. They sat on a broken bench near the orchard, where apples still clung to the trees like they did when they were children. "I never stopped thinking about you," Boone said. Helena stared out at the grass. "Then why did you never write?" He looked down at his hands. "Because I was not ready, not to stay, not to be the kind of man you deserved. And now," he looked up, eyes steady, "now I am." They sat in silence, cicadas buzzing around them. Boone rested his elbows on his knees, fingers laced tight. Helena studied the line of his jaw, the way his shirt pulled across his shoulders. He was broader now, older, but his voice still sounded like home. "I thought I loved Franklin," she said quietly. "But I think I just wanted to believe someone could choose me." Boone turned to her. "I choose you. You do not even know who I am anymore. I know enough, and I will learn the rest." Her throat tightened. "You cannot fix this with one sentence. I am not trying to. I just want you to let me try." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once, almost imperceptibly. The wind moved through the trees. "I need time," she said. "You can have all of it," he said. They rode back to town as the sun dipped low. Boone walked her to the schoolhouse steps. She paused there, hand on the railing. "I do not know what happens next," she said. Boone touched his hat. "Then we figure it out, together." She watched him ride away, heart still aching but lighter somehow, like something broken inside her might just begin to mend. And though she had been left at the altar that morning, Helena went to bed that night thinking not of what was lost, but of the man who had found her. 3 days passed before Boone came by again. Helena heard the horse before she saw him, hooves muffled on the dry earth behind the schoolhouse. The children had gone home. She was wiping the slate board clean, the air inside thick with chalk and late summer heat. He didn't knock, just waited outside, hat in hand. She stepped out, arms folded loosely, sleeves rolled to her elbows. "I didn't know if you wanted company," he said. "You didn't ask," she replied, not unkindly. He gave a slow nod and glanced toward the cottonwoods across the field. "I brought something." She followed his gaze. A short wagon stood just off the path, canvas pulled back. Inside sat a wooden rocking chair, the finish worn but intact, a sprig of sage tied to the slats with twine. "It was your mother's," he said. "I found it in the loft of the old barn, figured it should be with you." Helena stepped forward, laid a hand on the curved armrest. Her throat tightened. "I thought it was gone with the rest. It was tucked behind some crates. I almost missed it." She ran her fingers over the grain, then looked up at him. "You didn't have to bring it, I know." They stood in the hush that followed, the kind of quiet that didn't press. "You always remembered things," she said after a moment. "I tried to forget some." His eyes didn't leave hers. "Didn't work." She turned from the chair and walked toward the edge of the field. "I took the school job because I needed a roof and a reason to get up. Not because I'm suited for it. You seemed steady with the children. I am. But I don't feel much, not while I'm doing it. It's like I'm watching someone else move my hands." Boone stopped beside her, arms resting against the low fence. "When I was trailing cattle last spring, a man from Abilene got thrown under his gelding. His leg was split near the bone. I helped bind it. I didn't feel a thing. Not until 2 days later when we stopped for water and I saw the blood dried into my shirt. Then I shook so hard I near dropped the canteen." Helena didn't speak, but her fingers curled around the fence post. He continued, "Sometimes the feeling waits, but it doesn't mean it's gone." She drew in a breath and let it out slowly. "I haven't been to the homestead since we sat under those trees. You don't have to go back if it don't feel right. I want to. I just—" She hesitated. "I need someone to go with. I'll come." She nodded once, and the matter settled between them like dust on still water. They went the next morning. The light was soft with overcast, and the sky held the weight of coming rain. Boone led her through the orchard. Apples had begun to drop, some split open in the grass. They passed the barn, where the door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old straw and rusted tools. Helena paused at her father's workbench. A small carved horse stood near the edge, half finished, its legs still rough. "I thought this was lost," she said. "I remember when he started it." "Said it was for your birthday." Boone stepped beside her. "He never got to finish." She lifted it gently, cradling the piece in both hands. "I used to think if I kept everything just the way he left it, he might come back through that door." Boone looked at her, voice low. "He'd be proud of what you've done with what he left." She didn't answer, but her hand found Boone's, her grip firm. They stood that way until the rain began, soft at first, then steadier. Back at the schoolhouse, Helena lit a lamp and set the carved horse on the windowsill. "I want to fix up the homestead," she said. "There's too much of them in that place to let it rot." Boone leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I can help. I've got time and I know what tools we'll need. I'll pay you." His eyes met hers. "I'm not here for wages." "I know." She stepped closer, arms loose at her sides. "I'm still not sure what I'm doing." "You don't have to be sure," Boone said. "You just have to keep moving forward." Helena looked at him for a long moment, then gestured toward the table. "You eaten today?" "Not since sunrise." "I've got some beans and cornbread left. I'd sit for that." So they did, sharing the meal without hurry. Boone didn't speak much, and Helena didn't fill the silence. Afterward, he helped carry water from the pump, and they worked side by side until dusk. As he stepped off the porch to leave, she called after him. "Boone!" He turned. "You were right about something," she said, his brow lifted. "The feeling waits, but it's not gone." He tipped his hat, not smiling, not saying anything at all. Then he walked into the falling dark, and Helena watched him go, something slow and rooted beginning to stir in her chest. By the second week of September, the roof beams on the old Sutton house had been reinforced, and Boone was planning how they'd brace the sagging porch before frost came. Most afternoons, after the school bell let out, Helena rode out with a basket of bread, or whatever she'd managed with her small stove and dwindling pantry. She never stayed long, not until that Thursday when the wind turned sharp and the sky pressed low like a held breath. She arrived with a jar of stewed peaches and a book tucked under one arm. "You're running low on nails," she said, stepping through the front doorway where the frame still leaned just enough to stick. "I noticed," Boone replied, wiping his hands on a cloth. "I can ride into town tomorrow. I already asked Mr. Cully to set aside a box. You'll need to bring coin." Boone glanced up. "You didn't pay for them." "I asked for credit." "You'll pay." That earned her a faint lift of his brow, but he nodded. "Fair." She set the peaches on the windowsill where what light remained could catch them. "I brought something else." He waited. She held the book out. "It's my mother's copy of Leaves of Grass. I thought maybe if you're sleeping here again you could read some in the evenings." It kept her company. Boone took it without opening it. "I never read much that wasn't a feed ledger or a trail map. There's a poem near the back. I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love." She used to read it aloud after supper. "You want me to read it?" "Only if it feels right." He turned the book in his hands, then set it on the table where her father used to roll tobacco. "I remember your mother's voice. She had a way of speaking quiet, like nothing needed proving. She never raised it, not once, even when she was angry. You have her stillness." Helena looked down at her sleeves. "I feel more like a cracked fence post most days." Boone leaned against the doorframe, strong enough to hold up a gate. Outside, wind stirred the dry grass. The orchard was thinning fruit, half fallen, half clinging. Boone watched her cross to the hearth, where he'd built a fire the night before with green wood that smoked too much. "I could bring more blankets," she said. "The nights are colder now. I'll manage. But I wouldn't say no to one of those quilts you used to stitch." "I never finished the last one." "Why not?" "I couldn't find the will to." Boone crossed to the table. "Maybe now you can." She looked at him then, long and full. "I don't know what this is becoming. We're working side by side like it's always been that way, but nothing's been spoken." Boone's jaw tightened slightly. "You want something said?" "I want to know where your head rests when you're not hammering nails or fixing fence line." He didn't answer right away. Then, "It rests with you." "Has for a long time." Helena's breath caught, not sharply, but like it had been waiting for that shape of truth. "I need steadiness," she said. "Not just someone who shows up when things fall apart. I came back because I couldn't stand leaving you to carry it all alone. But I'm staying because I want to build something with you." She stepped forward, the space between them narrowing until nothing but breath remained. "I don't know how to begin again. We already have." She reached up, her fingers brushing the edge of his collar where the fabric had frayed. "Don't ever vanish without a word again." "I won't," he said simply. The fire crackled gently behind them. Helena's hand stayed at his collarbone, not moving, not needing to. Boone's hand came up to rest over hers, light enough to give her room, firm enough to tell her he meant it. Night came soft and slow, and she didn't ride back to town until the moon had risen. When she did, Boone walked her to her horse and slid her stirrup into place without speaking. As she mounted, he glanced up. "I'll have the porch braced by Sunday." "And I'll bring that quilt," she said. Neither smiled. They didn't need to. The air between them held something better than ease, trust laid down like timber, one piece at a time. By the time the last of the porch beams were set, the first frost had come. It turned the grass brittle underfoot and silvered the orchard branches before dawn. Helena brought a basket of boiled potatoes and venison stew wrapped in toweling that Friday evening, her gloves damp with fog and her breath visible in the dusky light. Boone had already laid a fire in the hearth. The warmth met her when she stepped through the doorway. "You're early," he said, brushing wood shavings from his sleeves. Martha Hughes took the last lesson. Her boy's been falling behind and she asked for extra time with him. "She's the one whose husband works the sawmill," Helena nodded, setting the basket on the table. "They've got 5 mouths and not enough meat between them. She's been stitching for Mrs. Vale to earn flour." Boone pulled out a chair for her. "She needs a fence mended. I'll ride over Saturday." Helena eased down, unwrapping the stew. "You can't fix every need in this valley. I can try where I'm able." She offered him a portion and he took it without a word. They ate slowly, the quiet companionable, broken only by the fire's soft settling. Afterward, Boone stood and crossed to the window, peering out where the moon hung low behind the clouds. "Cattle'll be restless tonight," he said. "The wind's got a strange edge to it. They always sense it before it comes." He looked back at her. "Storms don't rattle you, do they?" She shook her head. "Not since I was a girl. My father used to read by lantern when the wind howled. Said if a man builds his house steady, he's got no reason to fear what rattles it." Boone stepped closer. "You ever think about moving back in here?" Helena folded her hands. "It'd need more than a porch to be livable through winter." "I can keep working on it." She searched his face. "Why?" He didn't glance away. "Because I want you here, not just passing through with a basket. I want this place to carry your breath again." Her voice was low. "I haven't slept under this roof since the day we buried my mother. I know, but it's still yours, no matter how long it stood quiet." She stood, crossing to the hearth where a single boot hook still hung near the mantel. "I never thought I'd want to return, until you started putting it back together." Boone's voice came from behind her, softer now. "I'm not just rebuilding a house, Helena." She turned. "What are you rebuilding, then?" He stepped close enough that the fire threw his shadow across her chest. "A life. One I walked away from before I was ready, one I want to set right if you'll let me." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for a folded cloth near the saddlebag she'd brought. From it, she unwrapped a small, pieced quilt top. The stitching was unfinished, the edges raw. "I brought this because I thought I might feel something again, working the thread, but I didn't know if I'd still want it." Boone took the cloth gently, holding it in both hands like it was something sacred. "You made this the winter after your father passed." "I started it." "Then put it away." He looked at her. "Let's finish it together." She gave the smallest nod, then stepped forward until the cloth was between them, held in both their hands. "I don't know what that kind of together looks like yet. I'm not asking for a promise. Just a place beside you while we find out." The firelight danced along the seams of the half-made quilt, casting flickers against the wall. Helena let go of the edge and placed her palm against his chest, over the place his heartbeat lived steady and slow. His hand covered hers. "I want a life again," she said. "Not just a set of days I survive." Boone's voice was roughened by something unspoken. "Then let's build it here with what's ours." She leaned into him, her forehead resting near his collarbone. He didn't move, didn't press, just stood with her in the hush. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the dry leaves. Inside, the house held warm. When she rode back to town that night, Boone watched until the lantern's glow from her saddle disappeared into the trees. Then he turned back to the fire, the half-finished quilt folded over his arm, and began clearing space on the table. He would need to find a needle come morning, and thread strong enough to last. The first snow came in early October, gentle and fine, dusting rooftops and fence rails like flour sifted from a high hand. It didn't last melted by noon, but it clung to the edges of things, a quiet warning that the season had turned. Helena stood in the schoolroom that Saturday morning, her hands red from scrubbing the slate board, and stared out the window as the last flakes melted on the sill. Boone had left a note carefully penned, the letters deliberate slipped under her door before sunrise, going to check the north perimeter. "Cattle are restless. Back before dusk. Stay warm." She folded it and tucked it in her pocket. The words weren't romantic, but they steadied her, the way his presence always had, solid, unhurried, without spectacle. That afternoon she loaded a basket with the last of the apples from her borrowed cellar and the half-finished quilt, now stitched to the border. It wasn't perfect. The pieces were uneven in places, one corner pulled too tight. But it was whole, and that mattered more. She rode out before the sun began its descent, the mare picking careful steps over brittle grass. The wind had turned colder, and the trees along the creek stood nearly bare, their limbs thin and reaching. When she arrived, Boone's horse was tied near the back shed, steam rising off its flanks. She found him behind the barn, hammering a length of tin to the roofline to keep the meltwater from leaking through. His coat was dusted with sawdust, cheeks flushed from wind. "You missed supper," she said, climbing the slope to him. Boone looked down from the ladder. Lost track of the light, she held up the basket. "I brought something." He climbed down, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. "That quilt," she handed it over, watching as he unfolded it carefully and ran one hand over the stitching. "You finished it," he said. "I did." Boone looked up, his voice quieter than the wind. "You planning to leave it here?" "I thought I might stay the night first, try the room again." He didn't answer right away. Then he opened the barn door and gestured her inside. "It's warmer than the house. I've got a cot set up near the stove." The air inside smelled of hay and cedar shavings. A small cast iron stove stood in the corner, already lit, its heat spreading low and steady. Boone cleared a space on the cot and she laid the quilt there. He poured water from a kettle into 2 tin mugs, handed her one. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll start boarding the windows. We'll need them tight if you're to winter here." "I haven't said I'm staying." "No," he said. "But you're not leaving either." They sat on overturned crates, the mugs warming their hands. For a while neither spoke. Then Helena shifted slightly, her voice low. "When my mother was dying, she told me not to waste my good years waiting for the world to change. She said the world doesn't change, you just learn how to stand inside it." Boone looked at her. "You've been standing a long time, Helena. I'm tired of standing alone." He reached out and took her hand, rough palm closing over her fingers. "You're not alone anymore." She stared down at their hands, then up at him. "You mean to stay?" "I do. Not just through winter. No, Helena, not just through winter." She leaned forward, her forehead resting against his. "Then I want to build it with you. A life." He kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper, like roots finding earth. It wasn't hurried. It was sure. That night they unrolled bedrolls beside the stove and spread the quilt between them. They lay side by side, not touching at first, just breathing the same quiet air. Then his hand found hers beneath the blanket and she turned toward him, eyes open in the half-light. "I never thought peace would look like this," she said. Boone brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Peace looks like whatever you build with care." She closed her eyes, her breath softening. "Then let's build it slow. Let it last." By spring, the orchard had been trimmed back and the roof fully mended. Helena moved into the house just after the thaw, bringing her mother's books and the carved horse her father never finished. Boone built her a proper writing desk beneath the front window, where she sometimes sat with students who needed extra help. They married in the orchard, beneath branches just beginning to bloom. No bells, no lace. Just a circle of neighbors, a preacher from White Rock, and the sound of wind in the trees. She wore a wool skirt and a wildflower tucked behind her ear. Boone wore his best shirt and a look so steady it could have held the world. After the vows, as dusk fell soft over the fields, Helena rested her head against Boone's shoulder and whispered, "This time, everything held." He kissed her temple. It always would. That night, the house glowed with lamplight, and the two of them stood in the doorway long after the guests had gone, watching the last of the fireflies drift over the tall grass. Inside, the quilt lay folded at the foot of their bed, patched and warm. The rocking chair sat by the hearth. The carved horse stood on the mantel, and in every corner of that quiet house there lived a kind of still joy, earned, rooted, and real. Together, they built days full of small, steady things. Shared coffee in the morning, fence lines walked in silence, apples dried for winter, letters penned to distant cousins, laughter low and sudden over supper. And in time, the house filled not just with the two of them, but with the sound of little footsteps and soft lullabies, and the creak of that old rocking chair in the hush of early evening. Helena never again wondered if she was chosen. She knew it in the way Boone looked at her across a crowded table, in the way his hand found hers without needing to speak, in the quiet, unwavering way he loved her through every season that followed. And Boone he never left. Not again. Not ever.